Museums Victoria respectfully acknowledges the traditional owners of the lands where we work, the Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung peoples of the Eastern Kulin Nation, and First Peoples language groups and communities across Victoria and Australia. We pay our respects to their elders past, present, and their emerging leaders. Our organisation, in partnership with the First Peoples of Victoria, is working to place First Peoples living cultures and histories at the core of our practice.
Thank you everyone for joining us, and welcome to ScienceWorks, and welcome back to those who joined us at our first talk. My name's Jonathan Shearer. I'm the General Manager here at ScienceWorks, and it's my pleasure to either welcome you for the first time or welcome you back for this session. We have a joint audience tonight. We have you lovely people in the room, and we have our online audience joining us as well. And we'll make sure that there's a chance for both audiences to be able to engage with our panel tonight. But before we start, I just want to echo the announcement we had on the screen. I want to acknowledge the Boonwurrung people as the traditional custodians of the land that we're on here tonight at ScienceWorks. The Boonwurrung are, of course, not only the first people, they are the first scientists, the first engineers, the first astronomers, the first people to really learn about our land, learn to live on our land, learn about our sky, learn what's within our sky. It's a long legacy of understanding space in this country. I'd also like to thank Cindy and Leah, who will be providing Auslan interpretation tonight. So thank you for joining us. So tonight's event is part of a series we have at Museums Victoria called Future Forums, Ideas Shaping Tomorrow. It's a series of conversations with the brightest innovators, the greatest creative thinkers, reflecting the big ideas and important questions that shape our future. And tonight's Future Forum is actually a special one. It's part of Melbourne Design Week. As part of ScienceWorks' Design Beyond Earth hub, where we seek to explore the role of contemporary design in space industries and celebrate the diverse ways in which design and science are creating a better future both on and off Earth. And it's been made possible tonight by the incredible support of Creative Victoria, Melbourne Design Week, the NGV, and the Australian Space Agency as well. It's going to be a wonderful discussion tonight, and to make sure that we give both our in-person and our online audiences the chance to engage with the panel, we're going to be using a webpage called slido.com. So we won't be offended if you're on your phone during this session. So if you go to slido.com and you use the passcode Wellbeing 2005, then you'll be able to submit questions to our moderator. You'll be able to upvote questions that you want answered. And that way we hope to get a really lively conversation going that's inclusive of all our audiences. So for those who are returning, this is of course the second discussion about design in the space industry we've had tonight. So we'll continue to explore how in a global space industry, Australia and Victoria are in fact at the forefront of a lot of areas of design in space. Our next discussion is going to be Design for Sustainability and Wellbeing Beyond Earth. And we'll bring together a great interdisciplinary panel of industry experts to discuss projects that promise positive long-term impacts for the health and well-being of humanity. And that's, people in space, but also the flow-on effect of that to health and well-being to people here on Earth as well. So thank you for joining us. And once again, it's my great pleasure now to introduce our host for the night, the award-winning journalist, Sara James. Thank you very much, Sara.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. I really appreciate it. And it's a pleasure to be here. And thanks to all of you who came to join us tonight. We're delighted for those of you who are here in person and also those of you who are joining us online. And again, hashtag Wellbeing 2005 to answer a question on Slido. What I'll probably do is start by introducing our panelists, chat to them for about 20 minutes with some questions, and then begin to ask the questions from you. So definitely it gives you a little while to send in your questions. I'll start, as I said, by introducing our panelists. And Michelle, I might start with you down the other end. Professor Michelle Watt is the Adrian Clark Chair of Botany at the University of Melbourne. Michelle uses imaging and sensor technologies in the field lab and modeling to understand how roots function in the world's increasingly dynamic climate, both on Earth and in space. So her take on the importance of plants and their many uses in space is fascinating. The aim is to reduce the impacts of agriculture on the environment while increasing farmers' productivity by breeding and managing more resources efficiently in root systems. So I really hadn't thought that much about the root system before I heard from Michelle. So we'll come back to Michelle. I also want to point out one other thing as we begin here. We have quite an international panel. Michelle is originally from Canada and has worked in Germany. And then from Michelle, I'm going to you, Kaya. Dr. Kaya Antley is Senior Lecturer in Industrial Design at Deakin University. Kaya is a researcher working in the intersection of human space exploration, human-centered design, digital heritage, and virtual museums, extended reality, XR, 3D printing, futures thinking, and well-being. So you're very well positioned to talk to us about well-being in space. Kaya obtained her BS MSc 2008 in Industrial Design and a PhD in Museum and Heritage Studies. Was it in Slovenia where you did that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, so we've got our international cohort continuing. And she is now, as I said, at the School of Engineering at Deakin University. And last but not least, and rounding out our academic cohort, we've gone University of Melbourne, Deakin, and now Swinburne. We have Virginia Kilbourne, Chief Scientist at Swinburne University of Technology. Yes, from here in Australia, but also the UK, is that right?
Yes, that's right. I did a postdoc in the UK.
Yeah, basically we didn't let anybody into this panel unless they had worked in quite a lot of countries. Thank you so much, Virginia. And you're also the first chief scientist at Swinburne, aren't you?
I think I'm the first chief scientist in a university in Australia, so yes, we
Well,
should have more of them, I think.
We should. Congratulations to you for that. And Virginia is a radio astronomer with the Center for Astrophysics and Supercomputing at Swinburne, where her research includes tracing galaxy evolution by studying the neutral hydrogen gas in galaxies and surveying the sky with the next generation radio telescopes, such as the Australian SKA Pathfinder and the SKA in the future. And as we start with that notion of astronomy, I might start with you and then go on to our other speakers. You know, we had that lovely welcome to country, and I would also like to acknowledge the Wurrung and Boonwurrung people of the Eastern Kulin Nation and pay my respects to elders past and present and any and all who are with us today. And I do think that as we look toward the future and everything that Australia is doing, and you particularly with the discipline that you follow, is there, I guess, room for a tribute to the first astronomers here in Australia?
Yeah, absolutely. And so thank you very much for the question. And I'd also like to pay my respects to the Boonwurrung people of the Eastern Kulin Nation. Jonathan, I think, started off this conversation really, really well by acknowledging that our traditional owners of the land here are the first scientists and first astronomers. And not only did they have a wonderful view of the night sky, of course, if you've just been in the planetarium show, you would have seen the night sky without the Melbourne lights and how beautiful it looks. And the life and the way that our First Nations people used to live was really guided by the night sky. So not only was it for storytelling, but those storytelling had really important, features that related back to things like when you would harvest emu eggs, or when you needed to go walk about, when you needed to go and look for a particular plant, and so on. And so I think we can just really reflect on how rich that knowledge was, and that it was an oral history. Everything that was known was passed down generation to generation, and we have evidence that some of those stories have actually been passed down for maybe 10,000 years, from generation to generation. So I think it's a really fascinating area, and one that as an astronomer who really looks at the physical side of things, I always do reflect on how important it is to the human side as well.
And I think it also is a really nice place to start before we go to you, Kaya. It's a nice place to start, though, Virginia, because we're kind of going toward the past and looking at the future at the same time. As you look into the galaxies. I mean, you must have such a staggering sense of time.
Yeah, astronomy does give you a big understanding about time, and so one of my colleagues found a galaxy that's 13.5 billion light years away. That means the light's taken 13.5 billion years to get to us, or just less than. And that is just, it's incredible. Like, we might live 100 years if we're lucky on Earth, and really realising that we're part of this continuum. You know, when you have a bad day, sometimes I just think, well, I look at colliding galaxies and they're not going to finish their collision while I'm alive, so, you know, it'll be fine. Like, I'll just go through this day. And
So colliding galaxies provide a giant dose of perspective, is what
absolutely,
we're saying here?
yeah, definitely.
All right, well, we're going to come back to that because there's some more interesting territory, but I want to go to you for a moment, Kaya, and I want to talk about, the well-being piece of this, because, you know, we began by talking about the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're gathered, and that plays in more ways than one. As we're designing and thinking about well-being and sustainability in space, are you also reflecting on that in terms of the design elements that you do in space?
I mean, absolutely, because, I mean, everyone from Melbourne would probably remember we were in lockdown quite a lot of time. And when I go overseas and explain that, no one really understands how it is if you are living in a close, small environment away from your family. For example, I'm from Slovenia, Europe, different time zones. You can't travel, you can see them. What you can see is only let's say, Zoom or similar visual representation of them, but you can never hug them. But when we think about space travel, if we go around the Earth, yeah, that's fine, we are still close. When we go to the moon, it will be a little bit difficult because then we will have a bit of a delay of a few minutes. But what is very challenging, for example, for humans is, imagine you travel 6 or 9 months to Mars. You will be there probably for some time and go back in 2 years' time. But what is interesting is that your communication will travel between 3 minutes or 20 minutes one way. You will send a message, and then you will get the message back 3 minutes, 20 minutes, depends of the rotation, right, where we are. So imagine how you will be living on Mars and not having prompt communication with that, with your families and friends at home. So I think it's really important to think how to design for those small environments. We call them ICE, isolated, confined, and extreme environments. Some of you have heard of people living on Antarctica. Antarctic divisions are similar examples, and we try to learn from that.
So talking about that, one of the things that interested me, of course, you know, I think about virtual reality, and we can come back to that, but something that had been just missing from my kind of understanding of this until I looked at some of your work is the sense of smell and the importance of our various senses in creating a more hospitable environment. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. So we are looking at how can we develop better not only virtual reality solutions, which is more focused on visual and audio, let's say sound, but also we collaborate with colleagues from RMIT, so another university being present. A colleague is currently in Sydney, so she couldn't get to us, but nutritionists are looking at how we taste and how we smell. So we're looking at how to develop multisensory eating experience for those people who are in isolation. So going back to lockdowns in Melbourne, eating, it's a really important thing for Melburnians, and the smell of coffee, obviously. And by the way, coffee has been introduced to ISS, International Space Station.
That's necessary.
Oh, yeah, of
That's
course.
like a no-brainer.
Yeah, and they had Italian astronauts, and she tested everything, so we have that. But yeah,
Weren't there some special sausages as well? Don't I remember that they got some up to the International Space Station?
okay, yeah. So I'm Slovenian, right? And we are next to Germany. They have really nice sausages. We have our own Kranjski sausage, and Sunita Williams, who is actually half Slovenian, half Indian. She's very famous. Suni is her another nickname. NASA astronaut, and she brought Slovenian sausages to ISS, so you can read about that. I would wonder how that smelled for those astronauts, but there's another story. I don't want to go to politics, but apparently there are some issues about the smell of garlic bread and things like that, because what is interesting is I recently went to Washington, D.C., and one NASA person said, you know, ISS and space travel, that's like camping. Think about being in a caravan with a bunch of people, and everyone comes from different cultures. And we recently heard about Artemis and how diverse we are and how diverse we want to go to space, but we all have different tastes and smell. So how are we going to deal with all those human things? It's probably quite a big question.
Yeah, so it's an opportunity for collaboration, but it also could be something that causes points of friction as well. Let me go to you, Michelle. If we're talking about something, if we're talking about all that we're going to miss, you know, I think instantly of the color green. As you go into space, you're lacking the color green. So I think you're here to tell us how maybe we could take that into space with us.
Yeah, so plants have been going to space as long as humans, so plants have no trouble growing in space. And this is a good thing because basically plants are the most efficient sort of machines that convert sunlight energy into calories and food. And so now with the plan to go to Mars, we know that it's not possible actually to take enough food as payload to actually get to Mars. So plant scientists sort of getting serious about this space business. And the fabulous thing about plants, I think, is space travel really highlights that. So plants give us our calories, they give us our nutrients, they also give us these flavors and diversities and smells. So we're very conscious of developing a diverse and accessible suite of plants and plant products, but they also provide psychological benefits. And this has been recognized and known particularly, for example, in Japanese culture with the forest bathing, for example. We realize that this psychological part of plants is going to be a critical aspect in basically our plant design. So we have a design approach to designing complete use plant systems for space.
So in other words, it's not good enough for the plant to be nutritious. Or you've got a little bit, it sounds like, of a checklist, and it's got to do more than one thing. Is that right, to earn its passage onto any interstellar voyage?
Yeah, so it has to do a lot of things. We're actually also, from a biotechnology perspective, in the Australian Centre in Plants for Space, which was mentioned at the 5 o'clock talk that we had here. We've just got funding for 7 years to develop plants. And they will also be synthesizing caffeine for you, so that's good.
There is a theme here.
Medical medicines. So they are biofactories, really, plants. But we also have this long evolutionary history with plants. And it's very interesting to talk about indigenous plant knowledge and interactions, because they indigenous use of plants really was absolute complete use of plants. So we're learning from them already. They made materials from plants, they made artworks from plants, they make resins from plants. Actually, most of the plant food of Southeast Australian Aboriginal peoples was below ground. So they used roots and root structures as their food mainly, because the soil itself is like a preservative. It was a very good way of storing and knowing where food was. So yeah, no, I mean, plants, they are amazing, and so we're calling on them now.
Calling on the plants.
Yeah.
Let me pause for 1 second because I want to ask our audience a question. Can you raise your hand if you are a cat person? Can you raise your hand if you're a dog person? I'm not going to tell you who got more. Dogs. Anyway, can I ask you if you're a horse person? All right. If you're any other animal I haven't mentioned person. Which one? Birds. Okay, now here is the bad news. None of them can go into space.
Probably not
right?
initially.
I mean, not immediately. So are plants also the substitute for the cats, dogs, horses, birds? And I mean, are we going to be petting our plants? I'm really not joking, actually.
Yes, and you should, because they've done studies of people in an MRI petting plants, and
okay, that I did not know.
You get a serotonin hit. No, but we talked about lockdown, and lockdown saw a huge takeoff in houseplants. People started growing plants because they are companions. And you mentioned the color green. Our eyes are most sensitive to the color green of all colors. So I guess that's what fascinates me. I hadn't thought about it that much before as a plant scientist, but now I am completely fascinated by the psychological interaction we have with plants. Yeah.
Well, this is fascinating. Let me come back to you, Virginia, because I think the other aspect of this is Pam Melroy of NASA said recently in a conversation that I heard, she said that anybody who knows her knows that in her head, she's thinking 20 to 30 years in the future, that she's actually never really in the present. She's always out there some decades. You're all nodding. Is that true for you as well? Are you thinking about where we're going to be in a couple of decades, and how does that affect design and your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So in some ways, as an astronomer, you think of the past. So you're trying to see how did we get here. But also, there's a really inextricable link between astronomy and space. And of course, we like to be able to see the night sky. And a lot of the things that I'm thinking about, also working in the space part of space, so sending experiments to the International Space Station, for example, is what is the effect and what's the sustainability of our activities in space, and what's going to happen in 5 years, what will happen in 10 years, but what will happen in 100 years, 500 years, and really sort of projecting forward to that. One of the things that I spend a lot of time thinking about and talking to my astronomy colleagues about are mega constellations. And we know how important space is for activities on Earth, like really, really important. But then we have this new sort of regime of satellites which are being launched at a rate never seen before. And so we've got at least 5,000 satellites in low Earth orbit at the moment. Some of them not working, some of them are working at the moment. But what I wonder is, what's the lifetime of these? How are they going to then be deorbited? What will happen in 10 years when more companies, so we've got SpaceX doing a lot of these satellites, so when we have other satellite companies doing the same, how are we going to manage that? And what is the benefit to us on Earth? And so I think when we're thinking of our well-being, it's, what are the advantages we can take at the moment, but what are the advantages we have in the future for planning for that as well?
So, I mean, are you saying, and this came up in the last conversation, that there's can you do something, and then there's should you do something? So are you concerned at all by the number of satellites that are being launched and the potential impact? I mean, first tell us how many satellites are going to be launched in the next 10 years?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, we have plans and then we have actuality. So there are plans for at least 200,000 in the next 10 years. That so when I had a look at the, what's been planned, what's been in papers from companies and so on.
Is that too many?
Well, these are small satellites, so they're not like a GPS satellite, which is a very, very large, long-going satellite, which is much further orbit. So these are small, agile satellites. The beauty of them is you can design them and launch them much more cost-effectively and much more quickly, and do the technology design much more quickly than you can with, a multi-year, decades-long project like something like JWST, which is obviously the space telescope that, if you've been to the planetarium show, you know all about, and hopefully if you're in this audience, you also know all about as well. So there's, I don't think that we're just going to blithely launch all of these satellites, but it does mean that we do need to, as a global community, take a step back and go, what should that look like? How much can our atmosphere take in terms of, deorbiting the satellites? Do a bit more research on it. And then what are those benefits to humanity that we have from these satellites? As I said, it's absolutely vital that we preserve our space activities, and so I think if we think of it in that lens and looking at each project like that, then we've got a really bright future ahead.
So I think, Kaya, going to you then, I think that aspect of design really is implicit in what Virginia's talking about. The notion of not just letting it happen, but being conscious and really planning. What are some of the kinds of plans that you're doing and know about that excite you the most in terms of designing for space?
Yeah, so when we first went to space in the Apollo era, in terms of humans, we wanted to survive, right, and come back live. But a lot of people are saying today it's important not only to survive, but to thrive. So that means that a lot of these design efforts are now going into the way to design for performance. So what does it mean is to design for people to be more productive. Not only on one side that we will have public workers. So if you think about NASA astronauts, they're paid by taxpayers. They are essentially public workers. And if we send those people up, it's very expensive, and we want them to perform well. So there's a lot of design goes now. So another thing it's also important to think is that at the moment, I think only 612 people went to space. What's the right number? But yeah, it's going to be growing number, especially to low Earth orbit, where we're going to see a lot of commercial activities from in-space manufacturing, because we've got microgravity. Then will be people who will be operating that, as well as you will be able to rent research facilities in microgravity. And then NASA is looking at going further to the moon. We heard this a lot today, and then to Mars. So if we want to design for performance, we need to think about how these people will sleep, because that sleep is very important for performance. And if we are in low Earth orbit, we will be facing 15, 16 sunrises every day. So that's really important for circadian rhythm, how we designed environment for that, as well as it's a constant, some sort of a noise, apparently a bit similar to submarines. it's a quite confined space. And then we need to think about, we already talked about nutrition and how we eat. Eating is actually very interesting because it's the only time that the crew will come together, because they work all day, their agenda is specified minute by minute, and then they have this opportunity to share experiences. I just watched one really exciting talk about design for space, talking about the table, how the table is actually important, because it was not included in the first space station, and then they realized that they actually need something to be around. And then design for hygienic things, so we need to make sure that we are clean. That's also very important from the all the infrastructure that it's inside, because, for example, even our skin, even our nails, all parts that should not float around, because yes, it is disgusting, but that's not the point. The point is that it can go into these kind of air conditioning things and can be a disaster.
So it's amazing to think of the level down to the fingernail that you have to think about when designing for space.
I mean, you can watch YouTube video of an astronaut cutting nails and how they do it, because even,
I would never have thought, I've got to go look that up now. Another YouTube video I'm going to have to watch. If I can go to you, Michelle, for a moment. I want to bring it back, and then I'm going to ask some questions from Slido. But design works both ways. In other words, we're designing from Earth to space, but aren't we also reverse engineering that? And aren't we also learning things from space that are affecting us back on Earth? And if so, what are you seeing in terms of that from your work?
Yeah, so we're expecting to sort of, turbo boost our innovations related to sustainability and water use efficiency, nutrient use efficiency, and zero waste on plant systems, because the plants in space are going to have to use recycled water, and their water use efficiency is going to have to be probably about 10 times higher than it is on any land plant. And these plants are also going to have to be able to use potentially nitrogen and nutrient forms that come from recycled sources. And also, we're hoping that the plants themselves, the products that they're producing, are going to be biodegradable and recyclable back. And so these have been targets for us for a long time in agriculture. Water has been declining. There are a number of countries around the world that have now capped the use of nitrogen fertilizer use in agriculture. There's also been a very sort of rapid and growing trend towards growing plants in so-called protected, controlled environments to minimize the impact of climate change and fluctuations. So all of those technologies that we need to get razor sharp for space are directly applicable on Earth. Not to mention the robotics and the interaction and the management of the plant systems that are all going to be automated, but we actually know that people get a lot of benefit from actually gardening and picking and preparing plants. So we are designing and envisioning and imagining a hybrid robotic human interaction with plants. So this is, it's so, it's been so stimulating as a plant scientist, even over the last sort of 18 months, just thinking, sharpening the thought for plant systems for space and realizing that these are the innovations that we've needed to fast track here on Earth.
So yes, definitely a link. Let me ask you one more plant question that's come through on Slido, which is, will it be possible to plant trees on Mars? And do you think it could help change the atmosphere?
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, that's actually a really good question. So the Mars regolith, so Mars soil itself, has some toxicities which we can't directly plant plants into yet. And of course, Mars also outside is really cold. It's the temperature of minus 60 degrees Celsius. So our plant systems on Mars are likely to be covered, maybe semi-below ground, and not necessarily, they won't initially be growing on Mars substrates. But it doesn't mean we wouldn't be able to grow trees, no problem at all, because the Mars atmosphere is very high in carbon dioxide. And plants just need sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water, and Mars has a frozen source of water in it. So there's no problem doing that. It's just that we're unlikely to be seeing Mars forests as we know them. But we definitely can grow plants in Mars. We just have to reimagine their environment.
All righty, Kaya, I'm going to move to you with another one of our questions from Slido, which is, if you were granted an unlimited budget and total agency in your research, what projects would you undertake and why? And I'll ask you this question after Kaya. Kaya, you first. You've got all the money you want. What are you doing?
2 years ago, I wanted to do a museum on Mars. Now, probably, I don't know. That's quite exciting, right? Should we help Elon to get Starship first? That would be something.
He wants to put 1 million people on Mars in a city. Are you in favor of that idea?
I mean, we need to like each other more, right? That's a good thing, because from a psychological point of view, it's really important who we send there, because we've sorted out quite a lot of things already in terms of space travel, technologically wise. We still got issues with the radiation, not my area of research and expertise, but I think how to provide better well-being for people on Mars, I think that's, with that grant in space would be quite exciting, because what I think is important is how can we continue to be creative? Because even if you go to Antarctica and you've got limited visual representation of what's around you, I think it's really important to provide an environment which is inspiring, because every environment needs some sort of visually and actually multisensory environment to thrive in the future. So I would definitely work more with humanities as well, because yes, STEM is important, and it's important. We are lacking of engineers, especially in Australia and everywhere, but still I think it's important to put together projects that will bring humanities together with STEM, and I think there's a lot to do as well.
I applaud that point. If I can go to you, Virginia, on that, if we've now given you, you get to keep the money, but we're also giving Virginia an unlimited budget. So we're basically in the United States, and the debt ceiling's going up by trillions. So what are you doing with your money at the moment?
Well, let me think. On the astronomy side of things, I'm fast-tracking the Square Kilometre Array radio telescope that's being built in Western Australia and South Africa to the full specs, so that we can see to the very beginnings of the universe and understand, I guess, how galaxies formed and where the gas was ionized and formed stars. Let me pass you the water.
I just need a glass of water.
Sorry. But in terms of space, I'm going to think about a project that we're doing at Swinburne with school kids, which is getting them to design experiments for space and for the International Space Station in particular. And this is something that I think we've found that really ignites the excitement of STEM in kids, and we're talking about kids who are about age 14, 15. And we've had these kids designing and building and sending experiments to the space station for, this year is our 5th year that we'll send experiments. And what they learn is that, well, we don't know everything, and I think for a kid in high school to realise that a professor at university doesn't know everything is a real revelation, and is really fantastic for their learning. And I'd like to then bring that experiment to every kid who'd like to do it in Australia and then around the world.
Well, I was going to say, pardon my coughing, but I did want to ask, didn't you say that one of your radio telescopes already discovered something that broke astrophysics? Can you please explain that?
Yes, so I did mention that one of my colleagues found a galaxy nearly 13.5 billion light years away, and that discovery was with the James Webb Space Telescope, looking in infrared light. And so what these astronomers, especially Eva Labe at Swinburne, was looking at was a cluster of galaxies. And at Swinburne, we've got a visualisation lab. So imagine that you've got an image of the night sky on a TV, but a bit like an iPad, and then you can just zoom in and zoom in and zoom in. So they're zoomed in, and you're just seeing beautiful, beautiful galaxies. And then next to it was a little red dot, and just like a dot that you'd put like with the biro. And then over there was a little red dot. And to us, we might go, oh well, that's just an issue with the image or whatever. But they realised, Evo and his collaborators realised that this was actually a light from a galaxy. And it was, we think, formed about 100 million years after the Big Bang. And we have no theories that tell us how galaxies could form that early in the universe. We just didn't think that they would exist that early. So either the theory, well, something's wrong. Either the observation's been incorrectly interpreted, which is possible. We'll keep looking for more of these. Or the theory is not right, and actually things happened at a much, much faster rate in the early universe, forming galaxies. So exciting. You have a new telescope, you're looking at one thing, find something else that's totally different and seems to break everything. It's great.
So lots for the kids to do. I'm going to go back over to you, Michelle. I've got another question from one of our viewers, and that is there a particular wonder plant that is basically meeting everything, a number of well-being standards, and would it be beneficial to humans on Earth?
Well, there isn't actually currently a single plant that can provide all the required nutrients that humans need at the moment. And so one of our targets for the new Center of Excellence in Plants for Space is to create a complete use plant. And our workhorse is duckweed. So duckweed, it's a small aquatic plant. It's actually, interestingly, a member of the grass family. It's a very beautiful little thing. It grows extremely rapidly, and it's an excellent, we think it's going to be an excellent chassis for the complete complement of nutrients and their forms, so sugars, fats, and proteins, for astronaut. We're hoping that's going to be our workhorse, and we're going to complement that with a diversity of other plant types that are more in the pick and eat psychological interaction. So yeah, that's there is not currently on Earth a complete plant. So that is, I guess, a kind of it's an idiotype objective that we have for the center.
All right,
Yeah.
well, that's a good answer to that question. Kaya, moving to you, are space agencies doing enough to look at well-being? This is another one of our questions. Is it something that they need to be doing more of, or are they currently doing all that needs to be done in terms of understanding that aspect of space travel?
Yeah, I think they are doing well. They should definitely or could definitely do better, but you need to understand that this is extremely expensive research because at the moment, for example, what I already mentioned, the number of people that went to space and astronauts, when they go to space, they are, yes, engineers and scientists who operate the scientific experiments. They also maintain, but they are themselves experiment as well. So a lot of research is going on how human body reacts, then psychological issues and so on. But still, we don't have a lot of data on those people. What we can do usually is to use analog missions. Obviously, this is not 100% the same how it would be, especially in microgravity, but at least we can get some good results there as well. And I think more will be needed to be done if we also think about space tourism, which is coming. This will be again, more focus on humans, but I think it's important to include human perspective if we want to succeed and if we want to have settlements on the moon, for example, similar as we have settlements on Antarctica.
I also really am fascinated by the way that twice you mentioned Melbourne lockdowns in connection to this. I mean, quite seriously, is there any study of the kind of impact and effect that these strict lockdowns in certain cities, Melbourne very much included, had that can be applicable to these kind of ICE experiences?
Yeah, I think there are papers that came out after or during this period that are related to this ICE, isolated, confined and extreme environment research type in kind of correlation with lockdown as well. And I think we can definitely learn something on that as well.
Virginia, there's a couple here for you, and I think you got people thinking with the 200,000 satellites that are going to be launched in the next 10 years. Is there a significant risk of satellites crashing into each other? And is there any central organization, I guess, overseeing all of this?
Yes, and yes, sort of. So there is a risk of collisions and of catastrophic collisions. I believe the Kessler effect, I think you're nodding, yes. So this is where you, and if you've ever seen the movie Gravity, you probably know all about it, with a little bit of bad physics in there, but anyway, never mind. So this is one of the things that we really need to be very careful of when you're planning for sending a lot of mega constellations into space, is how good that technology is, and that it is going to then have a safe way of deorbiting so that we're not clogging up the sky. So when I say 200,000 planned, that means that there are companies who are saying, we're going to launch, 70,000 in the next 10 years. That doesn't mean it will happen, because at the moment there are regulations coming in the US around especially low Earth orbits. The UN has a responsible use of space and peaceful use of space committee as well. And there's a lot of nations around the world that are really looking into this to make sure that we are very aware of the issues and then put in some sensible things in place. But as quite often happens with technology, and we're seeing it with AI at the moment as well, the technology is develops much, much quicker than the regulations. And it's sometimes after the fact that you realise, oh, hang on, that's going to have that impact. Now we need to claw back. So there's a lot of very smart minds looking at this. And there's a lot of research projects around cleaning up space as well. So from nets to magnets to robotic arms, the idea that you'd launch mega satellites and then go and bunch them all up and safely, bring them back to Earth so they can reuse the resources. Like there's the other thing, we maybe don't want to just burn everything into the atmosphere because we might like to reuse that aluminium in a future space mission. And we've seen some really great advances on that, especially with Elon Musk's SpaceX rockets. That first time that you see that rocket, the booster just landing back onto that pad in the middle of the sea and realise it wasn't in reverse, you realise the technological advances that we've made over the last 10 years.
All right, I'm going to just take a moment here, and I want to very quickly, because you made me think of it with bad physics and gravity, you all have an opportunity to tell me a movie that you think got it right or wrong. I'm going to start with The Martian, and you, Michelle. The Martian. The plant is the potato. True or false? Good science or rubbish science?
Okay, he got it right with the potato, which is an amazing example of the fact that plants can regenerate from their own tissues. So that was really good. He didn't get it so right with the planting into the Martian soil, which was what we were talking about earlier. But yes, full thumbs up for the potato.
All right, Kaya, Lost in Space, the TV show. Is that what it's going to look like, or have you not had a chance to see it yet? This is the new version of Lost in Space. Kaya has not seen it. Yes, no?
No, I never seen that, but I'm actually not a really science fiction person, but I actually love For All Mankind. Have anyone watched that one? It's, I think, on Apple. That's talking about what if Russia was the first on the moon, and what if the Beatles would still, be alive and do 8 concerts, John Lennon. And what if, so many what ifs, we would already have settlements on the moon. I like this kind of type of...
What's it called again?
For All Mankind.
I need to see this one.
Yeah,
okay.
the new season is coming soon. So apparently the person is pregnant and they're going to have the first baby on Mars. So.
There you go. No spoilers. No more spoilers.
I don't know what's going to happen.
Okay. Virginia, I'm trying to come up with another one for you. Alien, true or false?
No.
I'm going to let you pick another movie. What movie would you like to pick? Is there a great space movie that you think really gets to the heart of the excitement and the audacity of space, or do you also, like Kaya, choose other movies besides science fiction?
I was going to say Don't Look Up, but I'm not sure if it gets to the heart of
That's actually a good one to talk about.
Yeah.
That's a good one to talk about. The mining that's at the heart of Don't Look Up. How true is that, or otherwise? I gather, by the way, FYI, that the DART program that NASA did recently, as you probably know, they actually did successfully deflect an asteroid. But, how significant is that mining, and would we really choose to mine rather than to knock away an asteroid?
Well, people are weird, so maybe, but so I think the thing about Don't Look Up, there's a lot of concepts in there. So there's choices between corporations and, the science that's going on, and it's really an amplification of what we do see in today's society. In terms of DART, that was a really huge thing. If you've read the background into that mission, to be able to send that spacecraft and actually have a visible deflection on the asteroid is a huge achievement, but it's not enough to move it out of the orbit of potentially hitting Earth at the moment, but they were there to look at a potential opportunity. The movies where you send up a nuclear bomb and Bruce Willis to, blow up an asteroid, great, except it's really probably not going to work. You can't blow up an asteroid. It's not going to then just go, oh, now I'm tiny little pieces and just blow. It's really not going to be quite like that. So we haven't really solved that issue. But I think if anybody's seen Don't Look Up, the idea that everybody just is not talking about the elephant in the room, not making a decision that's really necessary for that, and then just leaving it too long so there's nothing that we can do is the corollary with what we're doing with climate at the moment. So look up, everybody.
Yes, all right. I think that's an excellent point. And one quick shout out to this museum. In 2018, Alice Bowman, the Mission Operations Manager of the New Horizons mission, spoke here at Melbourne Museum. And for those who are in the know, Alice Bowman was the lead on the DART program. So somebody who spoke here, and that was her work and her team's work at the Applied Physics Lab at Johns Hopkins, and also in conjunction with NASA on that work. All right, one more question so that we get out on time, because that's really important. I'll start with you, Michelle, and I want all of you to answer this. Let's end on a hopeful note. What is most inspiring to you and exciting to you about the work you're doing? What are your hopes for your work with plants?
I think what's most inspiring and exciting is, I guess, the opportunity to reignite this psychological, or make sort of really visible this psychological connection that we have with plants, which I think we've started to take for granted on Earth, with so much beautiful space around us and plant types, and then now that we want to evolve on another planet, we have to have that bond with plants. So I think it's that psychological connection that's really going to come to the fore and exciting, yeah.
And it sounds like it's also a reminder of what's precious here on Earth.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. The diversity, the amazing potential and diversity that we have here on Earth, yeah.
Kaya, what inspires you and excites you most?
I actually wanted to continue with diversity, but of people, because I think that in new space era, or this kind of .com type of new space competition, commercial / public era, we see a lot of different genders getting involved, people with different cultures. I think that's very inspiring from everyone here. That's the first thing. And going back to that my project with a lot of money, I think that the thing is that going to space, yeah. The thing is to really use these endeavors of space is like similar to overview effect. When you go further from your own backyard, then you're able to see back and got inspired, and creativity, innovation can happen only if we look from different perspectives. Yes, you can move from Canada to Australia, Slovenia, UK, but what about if we move, go to Moon and Mars and then look back to Earth? What can we bring back? What sort of new inspiration? And another thing I want to point out is that really inspires me that collaboration between different disciplines, STEM, humanities, social sciences, and even in our team, we've got colleagues working on artificial intelligence, psychology, nutritionists. I think that's the whole beauty, to work together.
I love hearing that kind of shout out to diversity in addition to that. Virginia, I'm going to come back to you with your space socks to bring us the last words on this.
I think it's the next generation, and so being inspired by the students that we're working with, whether they're in primary school, high school, university, PhDs, or early postdocs, really getting these new ideas from that next generation, and fresh ideas for how society should work, how we should think about, even how we're doing our experiments. I really get inspired every day by that, and I look forward to helping, I guess, growing our STEM and also our multidisciplinary workforce in the space and astronomy area. And I'd also like to just do a shout out to the book Sky Country, which is written by Crystal DiNapoli and Carly Noon. If you're interested in Indigenous astronomy and space, it's really, really wonderful, and highly recommend to anybody who's interested in that topic.
Well, thank you very much. I would like to thank all of our panelists who are brilliant, but who are also wise. I appreciated all of your thoughts, your sensitivity, and your inspiring ideas about the future. And I'd like to have a round of applause and then bring Jonathan up to thank everyone on behalf of the university. But thank you, all three of you.
Thank you, Sarah. Can I keep that applause going for Sara as our wonderful moderator as well? Thanks so much for joining us. That was an amazing discussion. Being a big science nerd myself, I love these events, but hopefully for everyone in our audience, it was equally enlightening. If you've enjoyed our Future Forum, our Design Week Focused Future Forum, it continues on Monday over at Melbourne Museum, where we have a Future Forum around design for future human health. So it'll be another great event for that one. Similar to here, it will be a combination in person and online, so you can join in either way. But thank you for joining us. And if you came to both sessions in the planetarium show, hopefully you had a great night out. And I'd like to thank once again everyone who made this night possible. Thanks.
More than 150 years after it first gazed upon the stars, we are restoring the Great Melbourne Telescope, an extraordinary icon of Australia's scientific and engineering heritage. We are seeking your support for the last stage of the restoration, which will see the dynamic activation of the telescope. Once complete, the majestic Great Melbourne Telescope will be equipped to once again explore the wonders of the southern skies. Donate today and make an impact.